Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Thursday, so welcome to a Thursday endgame video. This week, instead of going through theoretical endgames, I'm going to go over two practical endgames that happened in the candidates tournament, which has been postponed today because of the coronavirus, but let's hope it picks up. So anyway, these two endgames I found completely astonishing. The first one was Nepo versus Wang Hao, and then the second one was Alekseenko versus Giri. Both were won in the end. Both I had no idea how to win. And only after immense struggle did I manage to win one of them. Okay, without using the engine. Then I checked my analysis. Okay, before I continue, I am going through a 100-day challenge with Dvoretsky's Endgame manual. So I plan to go through the book, I've started already, in 100 days with 100 videos. So I will record a video on every 3 pages explaining every diagram and going through my analysis and engine analysis and everything else. And in that way, I hope to finally understand the book. And by explaining it to other people, I hope that my understanding will improve. I will be publishing all the videos on Patreon. I have published the first one today. I have also made a lichess study. Whoa, something happened. I have also made a lichess study with the Dvoretsky Endgame manual, as you can see it here. This is the study. I could add the full screen so that you can see it. Just give me a second. So I've made a detailed study on the manual, as you can see it here. It will have a separate chapter on every diagram in which everything will be explained in words and with the analysis. So everybody who wants to be invited can be invited to the study. Just leave your username in the comments below the video on the Patreon feed, and I will invite you. So this way, I hope to finally understand the Dvoretsky's Endgame manual completely. And I think that by going over all the games and all the diagrams and all the exercises, I will improve my endgame play significantly. So if you want to join me on the 100-day challenge, please follow the link in the description below. Okay, let's go to the games. So the first game was played between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Wang Hao. This was the final position in the game, and Wang Hao resigned. So that's understandable to very strong players, I believe. But practical endgames, which meaning they are not theoretical endgames, meaning there are no strict rules, are very hard. And often, if you are a weak player like me, or if you are in time trouble, you can mess them up. So after the game finished, I set the position up over the board, and I couldn't really figure out why the position was resigned, and I couldn't quite figure out why Wang Hao gave up without a fight. So at this point, both players had about, I would say, 8 minutes on the clock, close to reaching the time control. And they would reach the time control and then, of course, get more time. And it would become easier for them to play. But I still don't believe in the practical decision to resign this quickly. So I've set the position up over my board and I tried to win and I failed. Then I tried to win again, then I failed. Then I tried to win again, then I failed. Then I got upset. 4 hours later, I finally win the game. And when I finally figured out what the idea was, I just wouldn't believe that Jan would have found it in an instant and that Wang Hao thought that Jan already saw the idea. That being said, I don't know how to play chess, and they probably have played out endgames like this before. So let me show you what the problem was. So this is the final position. Black resigns. Now it's black to move if he didn't resign, and my first idea is if I try to go over here to win this pawn, then the white knight would easily pick off these two and win with the h6 pawn. So that clearly doesn't work. I didn't even want to test that. So for black, I wanted to go king f7 and simply pick off this pawn and try to use the electric pawns, the f and the h pawns, to stop the king from moving, and then try to play against the knight with my king. My king wouldn't be necessary on this king side. So here was my analysis. So knight c4, of course, white needs to go and pick up this pawn. There would be no other way. So king g6, knight d6, king h6, knight b7, king g6, knight d8, picking up the last pawn, king f5, knight c6, now king e6. And the idea is, I want to control the c pawn with my king, and I want my f and h pawns to control the white king. So there are a couple of moves for white here. Knight b4, knight d4 check, and knight a5. I believe that all of them lead to the same variations. So I thought that knight b4 was best, but in my analysis they all led to the same conclusion. So let's say knight b4. I go a5 in this position, chasing the knight away, and now knight d3. And king d5, simply preventing the pawn from moving forward. And the idea is, if king g2, then h5, king g3, f5, king f4, the king cannot take the pawn because of h4. Now, eventually, he will have to take the pawn to make progress, but let's say king f3, king c6, black can just wait, king c6, king d5, and if finally king takes f5, then h3 was, in my analysis, in fact a draw. So let's say knight to f2, pawn to h2, stops the pawn, so knight now has to reroute for the defense. Let's say white tries to win a tempo, takes, king e4, and this position is a dead draw. That I was sure of during my analysis. There is just no way to win this. The knight cannot get into the game. The knight could shuffle between h1 and f2 or h1 and g3, thus giving white a tempo, but that's completely irrelevant. The position without the knight and the pawn is completely drawn on the queen side. So then, let's say after king e6, knight d4 check, which doesn't allow a5. That seemed more promising. Now I could go king c7 or king d5, doesn't really matter. If I go king d5, after c6 I have to waste another tempo. Of course, the knight can never be taken because the pawn queens. And now again, king g2, h5, king g3, f5, king f4, h4, we have exactly the same position, in which eventually, once the king takes, the same thing happens. The knight has to run back. The knight has to run back to prevent the pawn from moving, and then finally this is going to happen, and this again is a dead draw. Okay, then final try after king e6. Let's go knight a5 to try and prevent the king from entering the position. So if king d5, of course c6. And now king d6, I have to prevent c7, king g2, h5. And we reach a very, very similar position in which the king can never touch these pawns. If you don't know the basics with electric pawns, one file apart, the king could never take on f4 because, of course, h2, and the king is not within the square of the h-pawn. So this is a very nice way for two pawns to win against a lone king if white isn't careful. So coming back to the original position, knight to e3. So this, at this point, I'd already spent, I want to say, an hour on my analysis. And my friend Vlatko calls me, it was around 11 p.m., and we start analyzing this together. And we are on the phone, looking at the same study on Lichess, analyzing the game. He assures me that there's a win. I'm still not convinced. So, long story short, here is what I wanted to do. So after king f7, which I'm still sticking to for white, I found a move that's much better than knight c4. I don't pick the pawn up immediately. I play the move knight f2. And after knight f2, it's king f2, it's not that easy for black to make progress. King g6, of course. And now I go knight g4, not allowing you to take the pawn. Of course, if the king marches towards my knight, then I could just try and defend it with king to f3. Eventually, white is going to have to play f5. So let's say he plays f5 immediately. Now knight to e3, and of course if pawn takes h6, then knight takes f5. So king f6 or king g5. And now king e2, my king is getting closer. King to e5, that would be the best attempt. Running back towards the pawn doesn't really work. And now knight c4 check was my analysis, and this, I believe, was winning. I have later checked my analysis with an engine. Some of my moves were imprecise, but the idea is correct. So king d4. knight d6. Of course, if pawn takes c5, then knight takes f5. So king d5, king e3, king e5, knight g3. Completely winning for white in this position. Okay, and the other move after king e5, which I believe is even much better than knight c4 check, is just king f3. And after king f3, I was convinced that white wins. So f4, knight g2, king f6, knight takes, and this is just game over in this position. Why? I'm going to show you why. Because you reach a position in which you can play a3, a position in which the king cannot take the knight, and this is fixed. You don't have to do anything about this. You get over here, pick up the pawn, you come back, you herd this pawn forward, and eventually win. So I think I learned something. Practical endgames are hard, and I was watching the Chess24 stream, and there was, I think, Magnus Carlsen, Jan Gustafsson, Lore Strent. All of them are strong players, and they keep forgetting that we are not. So they just said, oh yeah, Wang Hao resigned. And I was, what? Why would you resign that? If I'm playing this with black, I'm never resigning. There are so many ways to go wrong. And finding king f2 for me is not natural, it's not easy. I mean, I would have played on. Okay, now, let's look at the other endgame. This game was Kirill Alekseenko versus Anish Giri. So we have a position, let me take you a few moves back, where queen d8 was played. And eventually, this position has been reached in which after queen d3 by Anish Giri, queen a1 was played, allowing this tactic, queen e4 check, king g1, knight f3 check, and of course after king f1, knight takes h4 simply wins the pawn, because if you take the knight, then queen to h1 wins the queen on a1. So this was tactically justified for white by the move queen a8 check, forcing a queen trade. Of course, black loses the queen if he moves the queen up. So queen takes a8, knight takes a8, and now knight to f3. And this is the starting position of the endgame. I was watching this live. I had the position on my board, and I always watch the stream muted, or most of the time, and try to analyze the position. And I just couldn't figure out if this was winning or not. In the end, of course, Anish Giri won. Sorry for the spoiler. He won the game. I was still not convinced. And as we're going to see, Kirill Alekseenko had an easy draw. Now, that's not the point. It means that Anish Giri made a mistake allowing him a draw. We are going to see that position. But what's the principal idea here? What do you do here with white? My main concern, and what Kirill Alekseenko did straight away, is he pushed his f-pawn forward. So let's reach that position. So king g2, knight e5, and here he immediately played f4. And I was really concerned about this move. I thought, well, why not just keep the pawn on f2, create a sort of a fortress? And my question was really, if white plays knight b6, how the hell does black break through? So I did, I'm not exaggerating, 5 hours of analysis, and I just couldn't win. I did all of that without the engine. Later on, I checked my analysis with an engine, and the engine keeps giving black -1, but doesn't know how to win. If anybody is strong in watching this video, please give me an idea of how to win this. I still couldn't manage, even with the engine, I couldn't win. So the idea is basically, black needs to make some sort of progress, white needs to wait, checking as much as possible, being annoying as much as possible, just not ruining his pawn structure. Eventually, black makes too much progress, and something has to be done. Now, in this position, I was looking at two moves, knight d5 for black and h4 for black. My conclusion is that h4 is simply a draw, trading off too many pawns. f3 check, king d4, now gh4, gh4, and this pawn can always be stopped. Remember that if the pawns are traded off, so if you trade, let's say, the f pawn for the h pawn, then the white knight can in most positions sacrifice itself for the f5 pawn because it's not far advanced yet. So the main idea white has here is trade off as many pawns as possible. So knight f8, white is being annoying again. How do you make progress? The white king is great, the white knight is great. Let's say the black knight gets into the game. How do you make progress? I couldn't. I don't know how to win this. If you play f5, then it's definitely f4, then it's definitely a draw, no doubt about it. So after f4, it's just a dead draw. So if you don't play f4, what do you do? Let's say you go knight e7, and then f4 by white, king d4. I don't see a way to win this. I think this is a draw. So my conclusion on move 72 in my analysis, knight d7, is that h4 is not a good attempt. So let's try something else. So I tried knight d5, keeping my 3 pawns flexible. Pawn to f3 check, king d4. And now finally, black could try moving forward with g4. This was my last idea. If white kept his pawn on f2 and eventually advanced it to f3, this was my last try with black. So of course fg. Of course, hg, you want to keep the f pawn, not the h pawn. King f2, and now again, how do you make progress? This is my analysis without the engine. Engine checked afterwards. I'd written it down in a notebook, and the engine doesn't know how to win. Maybe somebody has a stronger engine. Maybe somebody has Alpha Zero or something. Please give me an idea of how to win this. I don't remember ever being in a situation, a pawn up in a supposedly winning endgame, which I couldn't win with the help of an engine. Eventually, when f4 is played, it's a dead draw. So, coming back to the game, Kirill Alekseenko played f4 immediately, which I believe is practically a dubious decision. Because it makes it easier to target your g3 pawn, it makes it easier for black to make progress. Of course, it makes it harder for black to play g5, but black doesn't really want to play g5 anyway. So, okay, anyway, f4 played. And we are now following the game, knight g4, and nothing much is going on. The position is equal. Again, white is trying to be annoying as possible, black is trying to make progress as much as possible. Any knight trade, of course, is completely winning for white, so remember that for black, if white plays knight takes g4, then king takes g4, and it's game over. The pawn endgames are winning. So yeah, it's important to say that in the starting position, after the queens get traded off, the pawn endgame is winning. The knight endgame is unclear. So knight h3, f6, king f3. Nothing is going on. Nothing is going on. Black is trying to go around. Black is trying to outflank the white king, and that's all nice and good. So Giri is sort of making progress visually, but what are you really doing? Okay, king to f2 played in this position, king to e4 played. Now seemingly black has advanced. Black has advanced. So king to knight to e2, knight to b1, knight to g1, h4 played, and knight h3 played. Now I had a different idea with white when I was watching this game. So after h4 I wanted to go hg3. I'm sorry. Excuse me. No, I'm sorry, not for white, for black. After h4, knight h3, I was wondering what about h takes g3, but after king takes g3, this is just a draw. And king f5, king h4, knight c3, this should be a draw. But after knight h3, king f5 played, not trading the pawns, and now gh4. Now, what difference does it make that white has exchanged this pawn? Well, it makes a difference because the black king can infiltrate to g4. f5 played by white, trying to trade off the pawns. Now g takes f5 is of course a pawn sacrifice. And now I couldn't understand white's idea. I just wouldn't believe that this is enough. But then I realized that it is. He played king e3. Now obviously if you take the pawn, then king to f4 should be an easy draw, even if you take the knight, because you cannot checkmate with the sole knight. So let's say here, 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 and the draw. So after king to e3, knight to c3 was played. Knight to f2 check played. King to g3, not taking the pawn, because once again, if you take the pawn, the king approaches, and even if you check, the king can take the pawn. And in this position, Kirill Alekseenko lost the game. Believe it or not, he lost the game. Now, I was analyzing the position during the game and after the game. I had no idea where he'd lost the game. At this point, my stream was muted, so I had no idea what the guys were saying. Then I actually turned it off at one point because they kept making moves. But anyway, in this position he played knight to d3 and lost the game. So the winning sequence for Giri was knight to d5 check, and after king to e2, the position is fairly simple, just knight f4 check, and the knights get traded off, and this is now a no-brainer, h5, and of course king g5, king f3, king h5, king f4, king g6, and the position is winning. After knight d5, I was wondering what happens on... No, excuse me, king d4 was played in the game. Excuse me, no. The king to e2 was my analysis of a bad move. So king to e2, just knight here. On king to d2, king takes h4 is winning enough. King to d4 was played in the game, but now the winning sequence was knight f4. Again, if the knights are traded off, it's winning, so knight c5, but now simply king takes h4, and in a couple of moves the game was over. So here. The pawn's much forward. The knight is superior, and in this position, Alekseenko resigned because there is no way to target the pawn, and you can just safely do something like this, or no. In this position, I'm sorry, knight to f3 would be stalemate after knight takes f3, but you can prepare it. And in this position, white has to move something. So if he moves the knight, you can go knight f3 eventually. If he moves the king, then you march your king forward. So that was resigned. But after king g3, here's how to draw, and I thought this seemed extremely logical during the game. And after the game, I was analyzing the position that I wanted to reach, and it is a draw. So the move is h5. And after h5, well, you have to stop the pawn with the knight, otherwise this pawn is queening. Black is obviously not quick enough. So knight d5 check, you need to run back, king d4. And now knight f4, attacking the pawn. Once the pawn advances to h6, you can take on f2, h7, and now knight g6, and this position is a draw. Even though black has a million pieces, this position is a draw because the knight is locked down. So king d5, king to e3, king e6, f4, here, and both sides are going to be queening very soon, so king g2. I couldn't see all of that, but I thought that h5 was pretty good. After engine checking my analysis, this was the winning sequence. So to conclude this endgame, coming back to this position before f4, I'm still not sure that black can win if white doesn't blunder, if the pawn remains on f2. I don't know how. So the best I could do is something like this, where the position is a draw, or something like this, where the position again is really hard to win. If you turn on the engine, black is better, but how? How do you win? I believe that in practical play, had the pawn remained on f2, white would have been able to draw much easier. Okay, let me know what you think about these two endgames and what your analysis is. Again, follow the link below if you want to join my 100-day Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual Challenge. And thanks very much for watching. See you tomorrow. I hope you are all doing well during this crisis. I hope you and your families are safe. I wish you all the best, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye.